try. Okay. Hello, fellow lobsters. Welcome to the next episode of Hello and Love of Literature. And today we have with us Ms. Rajni Mala. She's coming on board with her new book. It's called Kalyana. It is an Indo-Fijian fiction. So I'd request the same people to give a formal introduction of the guest.
Kalyana, in my understanding, is 6 years old. It's not new book. Anyways, Rajni Mala Khelawan is an Indo-Fijian Canadian author of 2 novels, Kalyana and The End of the Dark and Stormy Night. Her first novel, In the Shade of Bougainvillea Hedge, is forthcoming. Currently, she lives and works in Toronto, Ontario, Canada. We are very excited to invite you, welcome you on board. In fact, both of us, we have read the book, Kalyana, and we have questions to ask. It's going to be more spontaneous. Welcome, Rajni.
Thank you so much. You know, I find this incredible. This technology has allowed us to meet here and do this.
Yes.
I'm in Canada, you're in Singapore, and then you're in India, I believe, right?
That's right.
It's like 3 different countries all meeting together. I mean, how exciting and awesome is that, right?
Yes, of course.
Absolutely.
That's right.
Oh, yeah. So, thanks.
Thank you for having me, you know, on here. I really appreciate it.
Yes, most welcome.
Absolutely. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you for gracing the show. The first question I'd like to ask you is, there are different ways of narrating a story, right? Like there are people who write in first person, there are people who would prefer the third person narrative. But your story, because I've read it, I feel like it is a story that you have lived through, that has parts of it which are which have really happened, and you just are narrating it through your say and also as a hearsay. It's like you saying it, but you've heard it also, right? Is that your imperative?
No. It's you know, my first book was The End of the Dark and Stormy Night, and it was lesbian and gay novel. And I actually had a reviewer say I am closeted lesbian and I will come out one day. You know, they really believed that it was my story. And then fast forward and I wrote Kalyana and people are convinced that this is my story. It's not my story. I've been writing since I was little. Since I was in grade 3, I would write a short story a day. Creating characters is something that I've been complimented on. My characters, I think, feel very real to people. And even with my first book, The End of the Dark and Stormy Night, I wrote from a male perspective as well. And the main character was Ravi, and he was a writer who was trying to find his mojo, I guess. He was trying to find his way into the writing world. And he was not unemployed, but still married. His wife was supporting him. And, you know, I had women come up to me and say, where can we meet Ravi? You must have based him on someone you know. You know, introduce us to that closest person that you know that he is. And I couldn't. It's like, no, he doesn't really exist. But they were convinced that I was, that he did. So I think that the characters is one thing that I don't know what it is. Like, I sense the characters when I write about them. So the characters are very real to me. And every feeling, every emotion that they feel, I feel it as I'm writing. So, and each and every character, I'm not talking about just one character or the main character. Like every character I create, I really feel it. And the negative characters are hard on me because they really shake me up. It's not a feeling that I'm comfortable with. But, you know, I go there. So that's where the characters come. But going back to what you were saying, I did set the story in 1970s, and I grew up in Fiji at that time. So in that respect, Kalyana is not my story, but I grew up at that time in that era. So I had a transistor radio. I know what it's like to listen to that. I went to the school, and the schools were concrete. Certain specific things in Kalyana that were from my experience. So Kalyana's first day in school, where the red stick landing on her behind, right? Because she was afraid of going to school. That actually did happen to me. So that's something I drew from my experience. But so there's specific things that came from my experience. But other than that, it's when I'm writing and when I wrote it, I was actually working on another book called A Suitable Mate. That was my third book I was working on. And I don't know why. It was about finding love. And it's something I've utterly failed in. I mean, I'm a single parent. That's my second child. And I'm a single parent with my first child too, And, I'm approaching 50s and still single, really. So it's love is just something that I have failed in. And, so I don't know why I was writing about finding love, So I didn't really, I don't know why. But, while I was writing this book, and it just, the first sentences, Kalyana is my name. The very first sentence is blissful, blessed, the auspicious one. I believe it's something like that. Anyways, it wasn't leaving me alone, and I couldn't sleep, and it just kept going in my head. Kalyana is my name, and I was conceived, and the salt, the salt from the Pacific came in through the window, like the way I wrote it in that moment. Those first words kept repeating in my head. So I thought, and I didn't want to start this book. I really wanted to finish. I like finishing something before moving on to the next project. So I wanted to finish it, but it just wouldn't leave me alone. And I couldn't sleep. So eventually I just sat down, and it was written in like 6 weeks. I couldn't stop writing. And, I wrote from like 8 in the morning to 4 a.m., in the morning. And I would maybe take breaks to eat, but even then, so I was with the characters, and I was on that journey nonstop. So that's how I wrote it.
Okay. As I read your chapters, Rajni, I was only reminded of the, tradition of, oral tales, storytelling, we all have, especially in the East, right? I was reminded often as I read the chapters. And those tiny tales you had, especially on board ship and all that. I'm sure did you hear, I mean, since you answered that way for the first question, I must ask you, did you hear from your mom, and did you have anyone to check the tiny details of whatever you wanted to write? So that's what I wanted to ask you.
Yeah, and that's something that's similar to all of these stories. I think there's one point the dad was telling stories to Kalyana about Birbal and Akbar, but my mom was really, I was adopted. Okay. So I was adopted. I was left in Fiji, and my biological family had moved to Canada when I was a baby. So I was left. And so my mom in Fiji, my adoptive mom, that's where I grew up, with the culture, with the heritage. And she educated me in everything. So it was from alphabet to times table to, she was really responsible for handing down everything to me, including the storytelling. And, I live in Canada. So in the West, nobody really knew about the Indo-Fijian woman or the culture. And it's similar to India, but they're still their own unique brand of people, right?
Absolutely, yeah.
Exactly. So for me to write, like, I think one of the Goodreads reader had commented that I write with intent, and she really got it right. So I had a few intentions and objectives when I wrote it. And one of the things that I intended to do was to introduce the Indo-Fijian culture to the Western audience. So that's why I focused on these stories that we grew up with, and it's still going on. They grow up with the same stories. So the stories, what they eat, how you make coconut oil, which, you know, I did with my little feet, like that's how you lived, especially in the 70s at that time. So that was the culture, and that's what I wanted to focus on. And it was my way to just introduce the Indo-Fijian women to the Western world. The other thing I wanted to do, I mean, I love religion. It's not because I'm religious per se. I believe in God, but you know, I love religion. And sometimes I'm sad because, and I study religion. My Master of Arts degree is in the study of religion, right? So, yeah, and I received a scholarship from the government to, you know, do research on Indo-Fijian women's religion as well. So anyways, with religion, one thing is that, especially in the West, maybe, they focus on, when they're discussing patriarchy and religion is getting blamed for everything, you know, and my perspective is a little bit different when it comes to religion. I've done that in my first book. I probably haven't been kind to religion, but I had to rethink that because I went to Fiji and I realized there's a lot of people believe in this, and I need to be sensitive and compassionate towards their belief, you know, and that was just me growing up from 20s to 30s. So, you know, I started to realize that I had to be sensitive of how I write. So I wanted to do another thing was to focus on the goddesses that were strong, not goddesses that were, you know, under a man's rule or whatever, you know, however they portray religion. You know, there's just so many ways to look at the same story. You can even take the Sita story and look at it from the perspective of, you know, her living in this patriarchal society and then eventually following Ram and being kidnapped and abandoned and all of this stuff, or you can look at it and say she was still a strong woman to be able to go through all of this stuff and still stay strong, you know. And it's that I wanted my reader to take from the book. I wanted to empower women. I just believe in that personally, to be empowered, and that's what I wanted to give. Nice. So those were my objectives. Nice. And of course, I wrote it from a feminist viewpoint. So, you know, that perspective was, you know, narrowed to that as well. So, you know, it was a very focused book.
So, how does the research part work? Because this is most of it, like you said, it's more on the emotional side, but there are like little bits of history in it. There are little bits of, like you said, religion in it. There are little bits of feminism in it. How does the research part go?
So, you know, I did a lot of my research with the internet at that time, but I did know all of these stories. Like, it really came from my heart. Now, one place I wish I could do more research. Again, this is based on the Goodreads readers. They didn't, if there's any part of the book that's criticized, let's say, it's I didn't give much attention to the coup. So the military coup, you know? So anyways, but I wrote it in 2011. And in 2011, there really wasn't any information about what the after effects were. And I had left. Right after the coup, I actually migrated to Canada. So I didn't have, and you know, back then we didn't have video calls like this, you're pretty much, I think a phone call was like $2 or $3. So here's like, to put that into perspective, Canada's minimum wage was about $4.90 per hour,
Oh,
and a
dear.
phone call was $3 per minute to Fiji. That's what you got to remember when you look at that, right? So you have to work a lot of hours to just make that 10-minute phone call.
Oh my.
So you couldn't do that. So, you know, that disconnect happened, right? I didn't know what they really went through after I left. You couldn't really go back for visits because of all the military stuff going on. So, you know, it broke the families apart. So that's what I tried to explore in the Canada section, the disconnect. It was really disconnected with what was going on there. But my readers have commented that I think they would have really liked more focus on the coup, the military coup. And, you know, I just, when I wrote it in 2011, and there wasn't much there at all. I mean, YouTube was just starting as well. So there was no documentaries, there's no research being done on what they went through. So I couldn't write that part. And, you know, I mean, I was a single mom back then as well. So I didn't have the financial luxury. I mean, you know, I was working like 2-3 jobs right after that. Like, I didn't have financial luxury to go to Fiji and ask people, well, what did you go through? And then the other thing is, people don't talk there. They're a very private community, especially the women. Even with my own research now, I realize it's not that easy to ask them to answer questions, even if they're general questions. They don't want to go on record and say anything. So, you know, I would have loved to, I think it would have been interesting to research that part more and write it, but I just didn't have the luxury to do that.
It's very fascinated by, you know, your description of British India steam, you know, the navigation company SS Sangola. So I'm sure you researched for it. That's not what I want to ask you. You said those, especially the snake incident.
Oh yeah.
So I mean,
did you like the snake part or no?
Sorry?
Did you like the snake part or no?
We could relate to it because we both are also from India. I think it's more like we I mean, we all knew, like, you know,
it was fun in a way funny because imagine in a ship, no, that's not what I was about to ask. I was about to ask you, did you have anyone tell you such a tale, this or any other that happened on ship, on board? Did you have it?
No. It's you know, when I write, it's really, I close my eyes and I ask for the images. Like I you know, I just ask for images. And
you know why I asked you this? Because you very often, a few times in a page, you keep saying, mom told me that, she said, you know, so I was wondering, two things. Was necessary? Second thing, if you wanted to create a feeling in the reader that you really heard those stories, was that it?
Yeah, it's and that's the other thing too. Initially, when I wrote the book, Kalyana wasn't a writer, because in my first book, Ravi was a writer, right? So I did not want to make Kalyana a writer. And then when I finished the book, it's like, well, who's writing the book? Me? And then I thought, you know, it would be really interesting to just make her the writer, and then people will forever be confused that it's my story. But, you know, I mean, I really believe fiction should do that. I don't know who said it. Somebody said it. I think with the Life of Pi, Jan Martel's book, fiction, somebody said, I don't know who it was, but it's something that stuck with me back in the day. Fiction is, you know, you really have to make someone believe in the plausibility of it, that it really happened. That's what creating fiction is.
Which is
true. yeah, and that's what Life of Pi was. It's like this absurd story that, you know, you almost believe that is possible, that it could happen. So, you know, that's what has always driven me to write. And when I write, again, I, I, it's the voice. It's like, it's not my story. It's Kalyana's story. Who is Kalyana? I don't know, you know, but I am sure she exists. You see what I'm saying? So it's her voice.
Yeah.
And everything, like, it's just the voice. I just catch that voice, and that's how I create all of the characters. I catch that voice, and, you know, it tells the story.
In some places, I was reminded of R.K. Narayanan. Have you read his works?
No, I haven't at all.
Because some of the tales within your book, they reminded. Let me ask you this: how was it to hold your first book in hand?
Sorry?
First copy.
First copy of your first book in hand. What was your experience?
What was it like? You know, I always wanted to be traditionally published. So the first book, it kind of, you needed, back in the day, now it's social media, but back then, 2003 is when I wrote my first book. And then I self-published in 2008. It was actually the second book that I had written. The first is still sitting there that I didn't publish at all. Anyways, that one, I had sent it to publishers, and they wrote me back and really liked it, but they said it wasn't polished. And I was stubborn. I still am. So I thought, well, if I have to pay for an editor, then I'm just gonna self-publish it, because I thought that they should pay for the editor. But then, so, I decided to self-publish it. But then I paid for the editor, and I realized, oh my goodness, you really do need an editor before you send it even out to the publisher. But at this point, it was too late. I was already in the self-published route, So my goal was to become a professional writer. And my goal is I don't just want to write a book and pat myself on the back for it. I really take my craft seriously. So I improve, I study it. I do everything. I'm really focused when it comes to that. I've given my life almost to it. Not almost, I have given my life to it. So when I held the first book, it wasn't like overjoy, because to me, I hadn't reached my goal. So when I held Kalyana, though, that was traditionally published by an awesome publisher, a recognized publisher. And I would have to say that was, I felt like I finally accomplished that first step. So I'm not going to say that I'm at the top of the ladder. I'm just saying that I accomplished that first step. And there's still like a mountain to climb for me. So that's how I feel. Like I felt like, that was a little victory for me. Self-published, it was a hard road, because I had to figure out how to do the cover and then hire people. And as a single mom, so much money was going into it. So I was working 7 days a week to, and managing my household by myself. I would be so tired. It was really hard, like financially, to like be able to fund publishing the first book, the editing, the cover design, then the promotion of it, like that cost money too. And then also, like, unfortunately, even if you're self-published, you cannot send your book to the literary festivals, won't recognize it. The award seasons don't recognize it. So, it kind of blocks you and stops you. So self-publishing is good, but depends on what your goal is. So if your goal is to do it professionally and grow at it and create an audience who will come back to your work over and over again, then, it's I'm maybe self-publishing would still work. Some people have been successful at it. It just really depends. But I think to your question, when I held Kalyana, it was very thrilling. Yeah, I would, and I love the cover. It was professionally done.
What about,
So yeah, that was really
did
great.
you think of seeking literary agents?
So in Canada, 80% of the writers don't have literary agents.
Okay.
So there's not enough to go around. So, I mean, you have to do well in a literary competition per se, or you have a name of some sort, then maybe you'll get an agent.
Okay.
So I think that's the other thing too. If I had a literary agent from the beginning of my career, then I'd be good with it. But at this point, I'm 20 years in, and I have my own contacts. I mean, I know these publishers. I really have my own contacts, and I just at this point,
I was asking you for in the beginning, because in the US it's always the norm,
yes,
right?
US you have to, yeah.
Yeah. So during that time, did you think of an agent? You didn't think of, is it?
No, I did. I tried.
It costs also, right?
It costs because this is done today when you have to you have to physically mail your work.
Oh.
Right? And not just that, you have to buy a Writer's Digest. There was no internet with this information. So you have to buy a Writer's Digest and then go through it, try and find who is compatible with your work.
Yes.
And then send it to this person. And I had some interest from the agents, but mainly no, it was I just wasn't successful in I was more successful getting replies from publishers themselves. Even from the first book, they were writing back and forth and loving my characters and interested in publishing, even from the first. Then the agents, they didn't even reply back, And even now, I've actually thought, Kalyana's done well, actually. So I thought maybe now I can get a literary agent, but it's the same. It's the same. So whatever I'm doing there, I'm not doing properly. But at the same time, maybe I don't really need one, because then, you really do give 10% of your income to them. And if they're there right from the beginning, hey, if they help build my career, my name, but if I've done everything by myself, I mean, I just, I don't know. I mean, I'm not saying I wouldn't. I'm not saying. I'm not saying that I won't have one. It really depends. But at this point, like I'm saying, what's the point?
Yeah.
So
normally, how many drafts? Okay, sorry.
No, you can go on. I'll go on.
How many drafts do you do for a novel? Do you rewrite and keep rewriting? Do you have beta readers?
No, I don't like anyone reading my work when I'm writing them. So my first draft, nobody gets to see. And then once I write it, and then, I just work with my editors. So I might have, and these people have been in the business for 40 years. They've worked for big publishing houses. Some are in New York. So it's these editors that give me feedback on my work. So that's pretty much it. I don't, some of my family members want to read it, but I really don't like to have too much people giving, because everyone does have an opinion, or, they don't like this or they don't like that. You can't be bogged down with that sometimes.
I know.
Yeah. So I just wanted to ask you about how did your editing experience go on? Because the editor is going to tell us, this part has to be removed, or you have to rewrite this part a little bit more, or change the context of how this is done, or that. How did that feel? Because the characters in your mind is already formed, and it is it's full. It's a whole thing. So when the editor asks you to change, there might be, because you might have ethical dilemmas, because you are from this place and you know that place better than the editor, though they're gonna give you a marketing side of a view than the actual story contextual side of a view. So how did that go on? Like, were you very accepting of their opinions, and did you just go with the flow that they were creating, or did you have your own? Did you take your stand?
Okay. No, I trust my editors. I definitely trust my editors. So there are certain things, like I'll give you a specific example. One scene, Kalyana, I compared her feelings to a bite of a sensitive plant.
Yeah.
So in the book, it says poisonous plant. Because when I wrote sensitive plants, and my editors are not of Indian heritage, like they're, they're Canadian and Western, they're US, some live in US. They didn't know what sensitive plant was. And I tried to describe it and they wouldn't get it. And, my books are for the Western audience, right? Because I live here. So I had to change it to a poisonous plant. But in my mind, it's like, that was supposed to be sensitive plants. And I know people in Fiji would have understood it. Yeah. But out here, people would have just been confused, right?
I know.
Certain things. But I definitely trust my editor. That's why I work with them. But it was a process to trust them as well. And like with my first book, the publishers have written and said, this is where the book needs to be strengthened. The characters were always there. They were real. But, there are certain things I was doing that was not right with that first book. I didn't really think they knew what they were talking about, and I exercised my own will, and I went ahead and self-published, right, without fixing those things. And then the first reviewer, and this is the thing about reviewers, there's reviewers that really build you to be a better writer, and then there's reviewers that cut you down. So the ones that cut you down, I don't call that reviewers. They're just giving their opinions. Well, and reviews can be influenced in so many ways, right? Because they're not agreeing with your politics or whatever have you, so they review you harshly. But there are reviewers that are really interested in you becoming a better writer, and these are professional reviewers. So with my first book out, when the end of the Dark and Stormy came out, and then it was reviewed professionally, and she said the same things that the publishers said when I was submitting it to be published. So at that point, I thought, oh my God, maybe they were saying the right thing. Maybe I'm missing something here. So her review wasn't putting my work down. Basically, she said there was a lot of talent there, and I just had to hone my skill, and maybe I'll show what's behind the curve. And I need to work on showing and not telling. And the theme has to be shown as well and not told. So that's what I took from the first book. Now, people love the first book. So it's not that they didn't love it. It's just technically, she was trying to push me to be better at what I was doing. And, that's when I was writing A Suitable Mate, and I was writing it the same style as the other book. So, and then, Kalyana came to my mind. So I pretty much abandoned that third book, The Suitable Mate. And when I wrote Kalyana, I took that review and I wanted to show everything and be subtle in everything. And I know that it's harder for the general reader to read that because they're not getting all of the information. Like, it's really underneath. Like, I've even, readers have even said that it's not a feminist book, and it is. Every page is feminism because they miss it, right? There's no resistance there. There is. It's a subtle book. Everything is, and when you read my first book, it's in your face. a vulgar book. I was making a statement. Everything was just out there. And in this book, I really wanted to tell a story, but tell it with this subtlety, and that's what I wanted to master more than anything. So I wouldn't say that Kalyana's mother was sad. I wanted to show it. So it's her just sitting there, lumped over side of the bed, staring at the ceiling or wall for 5-10 minutes, and then just getting up to do her chores. So, I guess to read my books takes a little bit of work, and you really have to go underneath the surface to really understand it and get it, right? So, anyways, yeah. So the reviews really, really helped. I think that's what the question was, right? We had
Yeah. It was, yeah.
Okay, yeah. So for my second book, I was looking for an editor that would help me grow in that respect. Another thing that the reviewer had said about my first book when she reviewed was some places was nicely written, other places it was awkward and the dialogue was not correct, So I took that seriously. So I wanted to pretty much nail the dialogue everywhere. And, that's what I wanted to do. So I was getting a short story published in the same round. And then I worked with the editor, and she was making the same comments about my writing as the reviewer and the publisher did. So from that, I knew that she was probably the editor I needed to work with. And so she had never edited any books before that. So she edited mine. Mine was the first. Now that's her full-time job. That's what she does. She's worked her way up. She's very pricey now. I have to go back to working 7 days a week to afford her at this point, But she's anyways, she came in to edit Kalyana. And to be honest, does it make me angry when they're changing stuff and giving me suggestions? Of course. Do I think they're right? No. But, I have to control those emotions and just be open, because I made that mistake with my first book. If I had just listened to the publisher, I don't think I would have had to self-publish at the end of it. I get it now. And it was just my stubbornness, me saying, I know better, I know the best. And it's not, but I've also grown up, right? Like my first book, I was 25. Now I'm approaching 50. So, it's also just growing up. When I did Kalyana, I think I was late 30s or something like that. So it's, the maturity was there more, and it takes work to not be offended when somebody is criticizing you for something, or not critiquing, let's say. And, like I said, I do get hurt, and I do have those feelings when they're cutting stuff and, cutting things. But I do trust them. That's it. And not all editors can be trusted either, right? Like once you find that one, I just, you have to trust them on it. Certain things I fight for, but they're very little things. Like in Kalyana, I think there was a scene where the parents, Manjula and the mom, cut her hair, and I made a comment about beetles and, why is she comparing me to bugs? And my editor thought it's such a silly pun, right? Like, take it off. I'm like, no, I love it. Like, just leave it. So little things like that, I just leave it.
I was going to ask on that, more on that. I'm sorry, I'm interrupting. Do you have something to say?
No.
No, you said you had an editor for Kalyana. This is just academic point of view for aspirants to take. They will be, benefiting out of your answer, because from my experience, and also as an editor as well as an author, didn't your editors tell you to remove in certain places she told me that it repeats many places, was not at all needed. It could come as sharp, if you had removed it.
If you removed it.
Anyways, yes, and from that I thought, oh, she's only telling me stories heard from her mother. All the time she says, mother told me, she told me that. Wasn't needed, I felt. Your editor didn't feel that way?
I think like this editor that I work with, again, that was the first book that she edited, right? I think it's the rhythm of the sentence that she was really focused on, and that is really her strong point. So I noticed, like, I write with that rhythm as well, like that comes naturally. But with her, like that rhythm has to be there, the sentence, it has to flow. So I know that's her strong point.
For example, me as a fiction writer, when I get to hear a small tale or I read a news which is really disturbing me, later on in my fiction it comes, I will never write anywhere, she told me, or anything like that. Because I will own it, and I will show it, not even tell it, right?
Yeah.
And that
So
kind
the
of
mother
a craft.
was telling her all of these things, right? That's what you're saying. Yeah, like she was getting, it was her relationship with her mother, right? It's her mother has told these things. Or whatever, whoever her mother is,
No,
right?
okay. Beginning of the chapter, if you are saying once, then it is understood. The reader knows these are all from mother. Later chapters, I mean, in later pages of the same chapter, you don't have to say that, right? I mean, I'm just trying to learn more.
Yeah, maybe I will have to read it and see if that's something, I have to say again or not, right? Maybe that will strengthen it more, right?
Not
So that's
just,
another.
yes, not just once, it repeated. And I felt they were speed breakers for me to read further fluently. I mean,
But I think everyone has like different style as well, right? So that's like with me, I'm noticing as well, and other people don't have it because I'm reading some of the other work. Like I think I focus, and that's just my style. I've done it in the first book, in this one, and the third one as well. I focus on mannerisms a lot as well, like what a person's doing. And but to me, like that really what creates the character and becomes real. But a lot of people don't do that anymore. Like I notice. You know what I mean? So
I understand.
yeah, so I'm thinking, well, am I wrong in doing that? But then on the other hand,
No.
yeah, like people are
It is
connecting with
not
the
wrong.
work.
Yeah.
So yeah, so
it helps in character building, the mannerisms and all, because each has a mannerism. We all do, every one of us, right? So
yeah,
that's good, actually.
So I think, yeah, people have different styles as well, but that's something I can take back and, look at with the Goodreads readers as well, commenting they wanted more in the coup. And I thought about it and I'm like, maybe I had to like stay there for a little bit, explore what it was like after the coup before moving to Canada. Maybe it would have worked better, for a lot of readers, right? But again, sometimes like it's I mean, when do you stop working on a book? I mean, you keep working on it as well. And sometimes you really just have to let it go as well. So.
Yeah,
absolutely.
true.
Yeah. So I think we have come to the a spot where we can go on to the next segment of the session. The next segment is called World of W's. World of W's is nothing but W questions like what, when, where, and all that. So if a listener could not sit through the entire session or did not have the time for that, they could just scroll down here and get a gist of what we've spoken till now. Yeah. So my first question for your World of W's is when is your next book due?
Well, I finished my third one. It's called In the Shade of a Bougainvillea Hedge. It's a magic realism. It's about a hedge. So the hedge has emotions, but it explores division between good and evil and death. So that's, yeah, it's the subject of death. That's what I'm exploring there. And currently I'm working on finishing a book on indenture history. I'd like to read your book, Jayanti. Yeah, because of the indenture history in Singapore, like it would be interesting to read that. So anyways, I won a grant from Canada Council for the Arts, and that's, you know, that was incredible because that finally it's like Canada's accepted, right? Me as a writer, like that was amazing to win, but that's what I have to work on. That's what the grant is for. So initially I wanted to write it on from different perspectives, but there's time limit to that book, you know? So it has to be done within a certain time. And I can't explore all of the perspectives. So I'll have to do one perspective, one point of view. So that's what I'm working on now. But in the shade of a Bougainvillea Hedge, I hope, you know, I can find a publisher for it. So and it's magic realism. So
I would like to read that because I kind of like it. And
she loves magical realism. She's a huge fan of Murakami, so she loves magical realism.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Haruki Murakami. I love his writing. It's magical realism, and I wish to try one in future. So, how is it generally? How is it getting published? I mean, being a passionate reader, writer is one, but getting published is another entirely different thing. How was it to really get published? Is it important to get published?
Because you were writing short stories also, right? And you were writing, you have published 2 novels also. So, like, how is it?
Short stories I don't publish much. I've published I think 2. And so one of the writer actually won the Giller this year. So she had told me I shouldn't really be publishing all my short stories. Just because, you know, then you can't put it in a book. They have to be not published. So that's something, you know, I've published 2. I have books. I just don't focus on publishing the short story, but I've written many of them. And so, you know, I would like to publish that as a, you know, book one day. But other than that, publishing was, you know, it's always a challenge. Even for my 3rd book, it's back to square one, right? You have to look for a publisher again. This is a really cutthroat business. Like it's, and I want to, like, every book I write, really, I think it's gonna be the last book. Because, you know, you give your all to it, then you have to, you know, deal with
seen that.
Yeah, and then it's like, oh goodness, like I've given everything. I've, you know, worked hard, and then getting a publisher. You know, with Kalyana, actually, you might like to know this. It's interesting. I had sent it to 7 Canadian publishers, and 3 of them were interested. And they had asked for the book, and I sent them the full manuscript, and I didn't hear back from them. And I got depressed. So I sent them in 2013. I spent the next 2 years being depressed. And I had a baby as well at that time. So I was focused on my baby, but I was done writing. But then Fiji National University gave me, you know, I was a writer in residence there, and they gave me money to complete my 3rd book, which is the In the Shade of a Bougainvillea Hedge, that magic realism one. So I had to write that one, right? Because of that funding. So, you know, I was going to throw it all away, but I had to do that. And then 2 years later, I thought, well, you know, that's strange that they didn't even give me a rejection letter. They asked for the whole book and couldn't even tell me no, you know? So I'm going to call them and say, why did you not give me a rejection letter? So I called them, all 3, and they never got the full manuscript. It had gotten lost in the mail. Yeah, all 3 of them. And they were all waiting for it, and they said, we remember Kalyana. We really wanted to read all of it. And Second Story Press, you know, I had emailed it to the person that they told me to email it to. And between them asking for the book and me emailing it to them, she had left her job. I don't know what, so it never got to them. So when I called, they said, no, we still want this book. So then I emailed it to them and other publishers as well. And they pretty much accepted it within 6 weeks. And it was published within like 6 months or something. So yeah, I'm just saying this, just writers out there, if they're sending their work and they, didn't hear back, please don't get depressed. That's just follow up.
The rejection. Call them, ask for the rejection mail.
That's why you need an agent, because we're doing it
You must
yourself.
call them and ask for the rejection mail. Demand for the rejection mail.
Yeah, but it's an emotional thing. Like I said, I was depressed for a long time, before I even gathered up the courage. After I finished my third book, then I gathered up the courage started the third book, I think. And it was published like pretty much right away. But I'm going through it again, where I'm sitting with a third book. It's magic realism. The audience is not as clear cut anymore because it's about a hedge. Like, how do you sell it? How do you market? It's about a hedge, right? So it's if it was about a strong woman, yeah, I have that audience already. So you're publishing.
We cannot be going and hunting for hedge readers.
Exactly.
Anyways, so has social media helped you promote your books?
I'm new to social media. I think I just started maybe 4 or 5 months ago. So, social media wasn't there when Kalyana came out. And I think it's a good thing, but I think for not smaller writers, okay, you have those bookstagrammers, right? And they were working closely. They were showcasing your books and all of that. That was happening. But I think they're working with the bigger publishers too now, because I see them showcasing the bigger publishers' book, showcasing the Booker winners or the winning books. So where does that leave the people starting out again, right? Nowhere. Yeah. And a lot of times you send your book, it sits on the bookshelf, they haven't read it, or it collects dust. And again, as an author, you're still paying for your books. And this is what people don't understand. It's not a free book. You're purchasing those books and then giving it as a review or whatever have you, and mailing this out. So and they probably just don't understand that part of it. So it's as an individual author, like, how many times can you do that? And then it's ending up on shelves, and not even looked at. Like they used to be useful, I think, but I still think social media is useful. Because at least you can take ownership of your own promotion. It's giving you that avenue to make your book visible or make yourself visible. You can have a following, like what you're doing, things like that. But it all takes work, right? It's yeah. So I think it's still a good thing. It's there, but like I said, the bigger publishers are catching on to that, right?
Yeah.
So with your book being published by a traditional publisher, like the second book, Kalyana, what are the roles that the publisher plays and what are the roles that you played? Do your work stop with just you finishing the book and giving it to them, or do you have to promote it? Do you have to do the other work, or are they taking care of it?
It was incredible to publish with a traditional publisher, and especially Second Story was really, really good. They designed the cover. Now, this is a Pacific Island book, so most of those books are actually, the cover usually has sand or frangipani or hibiscus, like it's that kind of feel. But in West, we didn't have a Pacific Island audience. It's coming up now. Like, we've got, the focus is on reading more oceanic books or Pacific Island books nowadays. So that definitely would go over now, especially Fiji, books set in Fiji. But when Kalyana was published in 2016, that wasn't there. So, but the South Asian books were really loved, right, in the West. So that's the audience that they went for, because it's still a Indian story. I mean, not completely, but it's still connected there, right?
Mm.
So the cover, that's why the cover is what it is, because it's just markability. But they do everything, the setting, I absolutely loved it, the layout of the book and everything, the promotion as well. I mean, everything. So it was a lot easier process than self-published.
Got it, got it.
Great.
So, do you have like a magic number? Because some people have like a magic number for their number of words or number of pages. Like they'll have like, if I'm gonna write a fiction, I'll write it my like less than 300 or like, above 400. Or do you have a number like that? And do you think those numbers would work for people?
Well, I think the first book was quite tiny for me. It was 47,000 words. And then the Kalyana, when I initially wrote it, it was about 60,000. But then I had to expand the Canada section within 2 weeks of publishing it. I had to work fast. And then it went up to like 80,000. So my next book, I wanted it to be bigger. I wanted it to be like at least 120,000 words. Anyways, it's I think about 55,000 words. It's so I don't really wrap myself up around in the word count anymore. But the other thing I've noticed is the audience, the readers are changing. They have shorter attention span, right? So I noticed like a lot of books have like the shorter chapters, less words, and they're doing better. But I think at the end of the day, a person just needs to tell the story that needs to be told and not be wrapped around in the word count. If it happens to have 20,000 words, then that was the story. You don't want to put I don't want to put all of these other things just to make the book thicker. But in reality, it's, not really serving any purpose, right, for the story. So yeah, the word count is really not, just the story will determine it.
Got it.
I think.
Thank you. Yeah, I think we can end the episode with a few final notes from you. If you could let us know how you enjoyed this talk or what you felt about us, and also like a few parting words for the aspiring authors out there.
A few parting words for the aspiring authors. Is that the question, or was there two other things? That was it?
Yeah.
I think for me would be really grow in your craft, like be open to suggestions and really grow, and it will hurt. Like it's not an easy process. It is a painful process. You have to leave you know what it is? You have to leave your ego at the door when you become a writer. Like really, it's not about yourself, and you have to be vulnerable, right? I think you have to just grow in your craft and be open to those suggestions, even though they're hard, right? Initially. So I think that's you can't block those, and it's okay to like be with your feelings too. Like if I've quit so many times and then started again, right? In the 20 years. So it's okay.
Quit every day.
Right?
Every day I quit. Every day I end up writing.
Exactly. Like that happens, I mean, it's not an easy road. It's not an easy road. That's the only thing. And I think if you're passionate about writing, then that carries you through it.
Yeah.
You put up with everything else.
Absolutely. So, and if you could share with us how you liked the episode, or how you liked this conversation with us.
How did I like the conversation?
Yeah.
Yeah, it was really, it's I wish I had read more your work, but this is what happens when in different countries it's not as accessible. So, but I'm definitely interested in reading more. And I'm so happy that this kind of podcast exists. So, thank you for doing such an amazing job and
Thank
bringing
you.
this to the writers. Definitely enjoyed. I have to take into account maybe my magic realism, right? Maybe you can be the beta reader. Is that what?
I can be happily.
Really? Yeah, because I've
Yes.
read the samples of your work and it's it was very engaging. So I
Thank you.
think I said that to you in the email as well. But
Yeah,
I
thank you.
just read a sample and you've won tons of awards, so congratulations,
Thank you. That's
that's
nothing.
so
Writing matters.
it matters, yes,
Only
and
writing matters. In the
yeah.
for me, end of the day, the creation stands out. That's about it. I'm nowhere there. I just stand back.
Yeah, and like I said, I think already, my objective is not just to write a book and pat myself on the back. I really want to
Yes.
grow in my craft. I want to
Yes.
learn, and it
Yeah.
takes time and experience
Yeah.
to get there. It doesn't happen
Craft is my
overnight.
strength. Craft is my strength.
Yeah.
And I edit, cruelly my own work. I will edit like I'm editing my enemies.
Really? See, and that's the thing. I'm impatient. That's where my impatience comes in, and I think maybe that's my lesson because I'm just impatient. Once I'm done the book, it's like, okay, let's publish it now. I know this part's not working, but I think it's really good otherwise. So that's I tend to do that. I just need to like be a little back, I think, and be a
Yes,
little
you should.
patient.
Yeah.
But it's that's hard for me.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you so much
Thank
for
you so much
sharing
for
your,
having me.
yeah, thank
Thank
you.
you. Thank you for.
It was very enjoyable. I didn't feel nervousness either, which, because promotion's not my strong point either. So thank you. And that goes with you. You completely made me feel welcome and comfortable. So I so appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Sure,
Thank you
sure.
so much.
Thanks.